Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. So, this is the first video in the series where we're going to look at guiding you and supporting you through answering a 10 mark question. So, from the very beginning stages, such as understanding what the question is, on all the way up to actually being able to answer a 10 mark question and getting feedback on it. This is the beginning part. So, there's going to be some structure to this, but it's more of a dialogue from me to you before we actually start with the tasks that we're going to get ahead with. So, as you can see, we have our learning aims here. Let's get some highlighting going here. So, it's going to be a simple one. We're going to be looking at the different types of 10 mark questions. This is the focus point here. There's going to be two types of 10 mark questions that you're going to get and that we're going to look at. There's one specifically that we're going to base our whole the whole guide on. So there's one type of 10 mark question which I personally feel that might cause students the most trouble, and therefore it might be the one to focus on first. We also need to understand what the assessment objectives are for the outline and explain question, which is the 10 mark question we're going to be looking at. AO is assessment objectives. You'll probably be familiar with them as AO1, AO2, and AO3. And then finally, we're going to look at the difference between analysis and evaluation very briefly in relation to the outline and explain 10 mark questions. It'll become very clear as to why we need to do that later on. So you can see here we have the AO1, AO2, and AO3 descriptions. So AO1, knowledge and understanding, AO2, applying knowledge, and then in brackets I've got here selective points, bringing in wider reading. Again, I'll come back to that. And then AO3, and analysis and evaluation. These by themselves don't tell us too much. It's important to know what they are, but what really matters is understanding how these are weighed in relation to your questions, to your 10 mark questions, and we'll get onto that. So, I'm going to introduce the question that the video series is going to focus on. Now, I'll explain how this might impact what you choose to do if you're using this video as guidance. But this is the question that I've selected, and it's based on the culture and identity topic of sociology, which, it's a question that could come up in an exam or one very similar, but you'll get the idea. So, outline and explain 2 reasons why consumption may be affected by social class, 10 marks. We're going to leave that there for now. I'm going to go across and we're going to look at another 10 marker, and we're going to look at the differences and make you aware of what the differences are so that when you go into the exam, there's no surprises. So this question has an item, as you can see, so item A. It gives you this bunch of text here. So there's your item. Oh, went over there. And then your actual question here. Applying material from item A, analyze 2 ways that individuals may be socialized into identities based on age. So 10 marks. And then you've got this one over here, which we've already looked at. So, why am I bothering to show you the 10 marks? The 2 different types. It's because the way that you answer them, what's important and what's not important for each one, can vary quite a bit. And I think it's very easy to see 10 marks on an exam paper, 2 questions worth 10 marks each. You might think, oh, it's just 2 questions of the same kind of question. No, they're not. They're not the same. We're going to discuss a few details as to what's different about them, just so you know going forward what to look out for. Some of them are obvious, some of them are not so obvious. So we're just going to kind of go through them, and there's no particular order. I'm just going to highlight the ones that come to mind straight away. So the most obvious difference between these 2 questions, the one that really stands out is, so we put down here, there's no item, and therefore no hooks. Now, in order to explain what that is, we need to go over here. So this question requires you to actually use materials from item A, and what they often refer to as is hooks. So the premise is the item is there to help you answer the question. So what the examiners expect you to do is then also use words or phrases from the item itself in order to help you guide your answer. Now, this video is not focused too much on, the video series is not focused on helping you answer a question which has an item. Therefore, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it's important for you to see that two different questions will have the same marks look totally different. So no item, no hooks. Okay. The second part to this question, that isn't. If you had both questions in front of you, you would be able to see the difference. This question is asking you to outline and explain two reasons why. And this question is asking you, apply material from item A, analyze two ways that. So, different wording. So what does this mean in terms of answering this outline and explain question? Well, it requires you, because you don't have an item to reference, it requires you to have the knowledge to outline two specific reasons in this example, and to be able to explain each point separately, rather than relying on an item to help guide you in terms of what you might want to include. So there's less guidance. Now, you might be able to answer these questions, just fine, but from experience, from being a student myself, studying a subject at one point, and then working with students, with less guidance, students sometimes have difficulty in where to start. They could answer the question if someone just gave them a prompt, such as an item, but they don't have that. So this is something that we need to consider when we're going into the planning phase. And we will cover that in a different video, but it's something you need to be aware of. The other thing that is made very clear, even on the AQA guidance sheet, is the question or questions, outline and explain questions. It's very difficult to just recite knowledge. It requires you to consider two different concepts in sociology and how one affects the other. And this is unlikely to have occurred whilst you've been studying. So you would have covered all these topics individually, but this is asking you to consider how one thing affects another when you may not have considered that before you enter the exam room. So let's see here. How could we write this? So links between two different concepts. And then how one influences the other. So obviously, in this scenario, we've got social class and how this influences consumption, or how it's affected. So obviously different social classes will have different rates of consumption. That's something we're going to explore more in depth through the videos, don't worry. But I just want to make it clear that this question and these questions specifically require you to draw links between two different and sometimes considerable separate ideas that you may not have considered before in the exam. That's where the knowledge part comes in. That's where you can't just recall or how would I word it? Recite knowledge based on memory, just like a checklist. Doesn't work that way. So the other thing we need to consider is where the marks are going, or where they're coming from when you're actually answering this question. So I don't want to get too stuck on this bit, because I think it's more important that we actually move forward with actually practicing the answers. not practicing the question, sorry. But when we're talking about AO1, AO2, AO3, it is important to know. So AO1 here, there are 5 marks to gain. AO2, 3 marks. And then AO3, 2 marks. So what does this mean? Well, if we go back to the top here, we can see AO1, knowledge and understanding. So there's a lot of marks to gain in terms of your theories, sociologists, applying that knowledge and understanding, actually having that, demonstrating that you know the dates, names, theories that are relevant to the question. And obviously there's 5 marks to gain there. AO2, applying knowledge. So how are you going to apply that knowledge to the question itself? Now there's 3 marks to gain, so obviously a little bit less, but interestingly, if you were to just demonstrate your knowledge, you would only get the half marks. So AO2 and AO3 are really critical in getting to that higher tier. And then AO3 is a bit of a tricky one. We've got analysis and evaluation here. However, and this is super important, I'm going to put this here. There are no marks for... Oh, don't know what happened there. Why is that important? Well, the biggest thing is time. So unless you have extra time, you will have about 15 minutes. I'll put here. You'll have about 15 minutes to answer the question. So you don't have time to be doing things that don't get you the marks, right? This question is very focused, very straightforward in terms of what it's requiring you to do. You outline and explain 2 reasons why consumption may be affected by social class. You don't need to do an introduction. You don't need to do a conclusion. You don't need to evaluate points. You do, however, need to do analysis. And again, we can look into that in subsequent videos. So, where do we go from here? We have an idea as to what the question is asking you to do, the differences between this one and this one. So obviously no item, no hooks, less guidance. Links between 2 different concepts. No marks for evaluation, and then we've got the breakdown as to what it's worth. The only way that we're going to improve is to obviously take a question and try and answer it. So the next videos will be helping us through that process. There's no black and white way to do this. This is just what I'm offering you as guidance. There's going to be other ways. If this doesn't work for you, that's fine, but this is what I'm just offering to students. So what I want you to do for me going forward, you've got a couple of choices. So if you are not feeling confident about the 10-mark question answering process, and you want to use these videos as more of a more structured guidance for you, then I would suggest that you write down this question here. So you should write this one down, because this is the example we're going to use throughout the whole series. If you are feeling more confident, or you want to work on your 10-mark answers for a different topic, it could be culture and identity, it could be education, it could be crime, it could be whatever you want it to be that you've covered. I want you to go out there and find a 10-mark outline and explain question that you want to use to help you with this. So I'm going to write down here. So Find a 10 mark. And find a 10 mark I'll explain question. Before you go on to the next video, that's something you're going to need. It doesn't matter which one you choose, you just need to have that with you. So this is for your next video. What I would say is this: there's a fair bit of information on here. If you've reviewed this video, you have questions, there could be a whole bunch of things that I've not considered. What I need you to do is contact your teacher or contact myself, contact someone that you work with closely and relay those questions across, because obviously this is in video format. This is to help you, but I understand that I can't necessarily answer everything, especially when it's asynchronous. So if there's any questions you have at all about what you've covered in this video, please let me know. The easiest way to do it would be to contact your sociology teacher through email, through Teams, seeing them in person, and let them know that way. You can obviously contact me on Teams or in person as well, whichever one works for you. Okay, I'll see you on the next video. Take care.